My husband moved out of our bedroom on a Tuesday night, not out of the house, just out of our room. He took his pillow, his folded blanket, and disappeared into the little room off the pantry, without a single word of explanation. I told myself, don't make a mountain out of one small stone. Maybe his back was hurting. Maybe he had a cough. Maybe he didn't want to wake me. But by the fifth night, the shape of his absence felt more real than the shape of his body ever had. We were Amish, 29 years married, 2 grown daughters, 1 son. A farm that didn't make us rich but kept us fed and honest. To anyone looking in from the road, we looked exactly the same. Jonas still came to supper, still bowed his head at the table, still hung his hat on the same peg by the door, still asked whether the south fence needed mending before the rain. But at night, when the house went quiet, the truth showed itself. He'd lift the lamp, not look at me too long, and say he had a few things to do. Then I'd hear the pantry door close. Not angry, not hard, just firm. Firm enough to say, this is no accident. You can survive shouting in a marriage. At least shouting means both hearts are still in the room. But careful quiet? Careful quiet cuts deeper than rage. Quiet means a person has already walked a long way from you in their mind. By the second week, I stopped lying to myself. My husband was leaving me without leaving the house. Then one morning, before dawn, I heard the front door close. Too soft for a man with nothing to hide. I wrapped my shawl around me, looked through the curtain, and saw Jonas crossing the yard with the lantern held low. He didn't go to the barn. He didn't go to the milk shed. He went to the road. He stood there in the dim gray light, hat on, shoulders bent forward, like a man waiting on judgment. After a few minutes, an English truck rolled up. Jonas climbed in. My stomach turned cold. When he returned, I was kneading bread. He washed his hands, sat down, and said nothing. I asked where he'd been. To take care of something, he said. What something? He tore a piece of bread, dipped it in apple butter, and said, something that needed doing. Then he looked at me, not hard, not unkind, just tired down to the bone, and in that look was the first true warning. He was carrying something bigger than stubbornness. That same day, I found the letter. I wasn't searching for it. I was taking his coat from the peg because rain had come in through the window. When I shook it out, an envelope fell from the inside pocket to the floor. It wasn't sealed. I stared at it for a long moment. The paper was soft from being handled too much. My name wasn't on it. His wasn't either. Just our road and district, in a hand I didn't know. I should have put it back. I didn't. The letter was from a woman named Rose. She wrote in a careful hand, like every word had cost her something. She said she'd put off writing for years. She said a man deserves to know where he came from. She said the truth had to be told before it became a grave matter instead of a family matter. And at the bottom, she wrote 4 words that I still hear in my sleep. He has your eyes. He has your eyes. I read that line until the words lost their shape. I folded the letter back exactly as I'd found it. My hands were steady. My chest was not. There are fears a woman can name. Another woman, a hidden child, a sin that walked into her marriage before she knew the door was open. And then there are fears so sharp you can't even touch them at first. You just stand there and let them bleed through you. But here is what Jonas didn't know. There was a part of my life I had never told him. I had carried it so long it no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a scar under old clothing. Hidden, quiet, done aching. I was 17 the summer before I joined the church. His name was Noah. He was Amish-born, but not steady. The kind of young man older women would sigh over. He laughed easy. He spoke with a tenderness that made you think tenderness was the same as truth. He told me he'd speak to my father by harvest. He told me my plain face looked beautiful when the sun was low. No girl believes herself the kind who can be undone by sweetness. That is why so many are. He left in August to work with an uncle in another county. By September, he was dead. A horse spooked on a wet road. His neck was broken before anyone reached him. 3 weeks later, my courses didn't come. My father said arrangements would be made. My mother cried at night where she thought I couldn't hear, and my Aunt Sadie, who lived far off, took me in when I could no longer hide what I was carrying. I gave birth in late spring, windows shut, curtains drawn tight. He was a boy. They let me hold him only once. He had dark hair stuck damp to his head. His hand opened and closed against the blanket like he was reaching for something I couldn't give him. I counted each finger. I kissed the soft place near his temple. I whispered Samuel in his ear, because I had to call him something before they carried him away. An English couple who could not have children took him. I was told it was mercy. I was told to thank God the matter had been handled without public shame. I went home 6 weeks later, thinner, quieter, and already learning how not to look backward. 2 years later, I married Jonas. I never told him. Not during courting, not on our wedding night, not after our daughters were born, or our son Caleb, not through fevers and debts and the bearing of his mother and all the ordinary sorrows and mercies that make up a life. Each year I stayed silent. The telling became less possible. How do you bring a ghost to the supper table after 29 years? When I understood what Rose's letter meant, that someone had found my son, I followed Jonas. I hitched our small buggy before sunrise and kept far enough back that the dust might hide me. The truck carried him to the edge of town, an old diner across from a gas station. I pulled off behind a row of trees and watched. Jonas stepped out. Then another man came from the diner, younger than Jonas, broad-shouldered, brown hat in his hands, turning it nervously. He stood the way men stand when they're trying to remember how not to run. Jonas said something. The man nodded. Then he lifted his face, and I forgot how to breathe. He had my father's brow, my mother's mouth, my eyes. My son had become a man while I was busy being a wife. That evening, Jonas came in from feeding the stock and stopped when he saw my face. "You saw us?" he said. I asked how long he'd known. He closed his eyes, just for one moment, as if sleep might be behind them if he could reach it. 3 weeks, he said. Rose wrote because she didn't know if you were still living. When I read the letter, I understood there was a truth in this house older than our children and heavier than any one letter could carry. I asked why he hadn't come to me that same night. He looked at me with such sorrow that my anger slipped and pain rushed in under it. Because if I had lain beside you in that bed, he said, I would have asked you with hurt before I asked you with love. And once a thing is said that way, it cannot be unsaid. He told me everything. Rose was the widow of the man who had adopted my son after her sister died. She was ill now. Not expected to see another winter. The man I saw in town was named Daniel. He'd always known he was adopted. He'd found the name Samuel written in the margin of an old record, and it had haunted him for years. When Daniel had asked if he should find me, Rose had written first. But why did you leave our room? I asked. Why not just tell me? Jonas sat down hard in the chair by the stove, like a man who'd been standing too long under weight. Because, he said, I lay there beside you that first night, and all I could see was a young girl in a shut-up room being made to give away her baby. I kept thinking of all the nights I held you, all the winters we shared that bed, all the times you turned your face to the wall and I thought you were only tired. His hands were trembling. He had been meeting Daniel, Jonas told me, not to keep him from me, but to keep him from coming to me angry. The first time Jonas saw him, Daniel had arrived with 35 years of questions and a jaw set hard enough to break them with. He wanted to know if I had given him away freely, whether I'd gone on and made a comfortable life without a thought for him. Jonas had sat with him, listened to every rough word, told him a mother who abandons her child is not the same as a mother who loses him while still alive. Then he told Daniel, if you want to meet her, you'll meet the full truth, not the sharpest version of it. I asked what else he'd said. Jonas looked at me the way he'd looked at me when our first daughter was born. I told him, he said softly, that if you had forgotten him, I would not be sitting in diners before sunrise, asking strangers how to soften this for a woman I love. I sat down because my knees wouldn't hold me. 2 days later, I met my son, I tied my bonnet strings and untied them again twice. I changed my apron, though it didn't matter. I stood at the window and watched the lane as if weather might decide the thing for me. Daniel was already at the diner when we arrived. He stood when we entered. For a moment, neither of us moved. He was a grown man, lines at the corners of his eyes, work in his shoulders, a scar near his chin I had never seen before. And yet the second I looked at him, I also saw the baby, the mouth, the brow, the little searching hand. He said my eyes were exactly like his when he looked in the mirror. That broke something open. I told him I was sorry. He said he'd waited 35 years to hear whether sorry was all I had. So I told him plain. I said I had loved him the instant I held him. I said, shame can make cowards of people who later spend half a lifetime pretending they are brave. I said, not a year went by that I didn't think of his birthday, though I never knew if I was counting the right day because grief blurs calendars. He asked the question I had feared most. If you loved me, why did you stay gone? Before I could find words, Jonas spoke, because the men who should have protected her taught her that silence was righteousness, and by the time she had a life steady enough to reach for you, the silence had become a wall. That was wrong. But wrong and uncaring are not the same thing. Something in Daniel shifted. Not forgiven, not settled, just widened. Wide enough to let more truth in. He told me he had a daughter of his own, 12 years old, named Emma. A granddaughter. The world had gone on making branches from the limb I thought had been cut off. Before we left, he put his arms around me. Careful at first, like a man unsure whether he was touching permission or regret. Then I held him back. He smelled of motor oil and soap. His shoulder was warm. His hand at my back was steady. And in that plain diner with spoons clinking and a waitress calling to the cook, I held the child I had lost and the man he had become all at once. That night, Jonas came back to our room. I asked if he was sure. He said no. Then gave the smallest smile and said, marriage is not made of sure things, it is made of staying. Our hands found each other under the quilt. Old hands, work-worn hands, hands that had buried and planted and failed and forgiven. If you ask me what I learned when my husband stopped sleeping in our room, I'll tell you this. A shared bed is not the deepest intimacy in a marriage. Shared truth is. You can lie beside someone for 30 years and still keep a locked room in your heart. You can also lose your footing, tell the truth late, and find that love is not gone. It was standing in the doorway the whole time, waiting to see if you would finally open. The silence took my son once. I will not let it take the rest of my life.